Hello everyone, I thought I'd make a video just to try to make some more edited content and try this out. So I wanted to make a video of my favorite hobbies, and well, here we go. So I'm actually divided this into 3 sections. The primary hobby, which is basically the hobby that I'm interested all year round. I try to keep up with as much as I can. The secondary, which my interest may come and go, but I generally try to keep up with or consume it, and that's generally year-round as well. Maybe sometimes it's a bit more, it's a bit less, but it is something I always try to keep track of it. And then this is the tertiary, which is the stuff that they do come from time to time, but I don't really keep up with it that much or all often. It's just something that will come and I'll be interested in for a little bit, and then it'll wean off. So for the primary, it's pretty obvious if you look at my YouTube videos. It's video games. So my history with video games goes back to a very young age. I remember having a Sega Genesis, and the first game I can really remember playing was Sonic the Hedgehog, but I also remember playing quite a few other games, and Street Fighter 2 was my most played game on that. I played a ton of Street Fighter 2 Special Champion Edition with my brother. We played that game for hours, but it was really when we got the PlayStation, and Crash Bandicoot 2 was the first game I can really remember playing on when we got the PS1, but my grandmother would get us a ton of games, and I just have so many fond memories as a kid playing all those games, like Strider 2, Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories, K1 Grand Prix. The list could go on for quite a while. I just have really fond memories of the PlayStation, really nostalgic for that. Of course, I also went on to get a PlayStation 2, and I ended up having Final Fantasy X, which was I do consider to be my favorite game. I still adore that game, and I'm very nostalgic for it, but there's other games on it too that I played. I played a lot of the wrestling games. I've been playing Metal Gear Solid 2 and really enjoying that. And then of course there's other consoles too that I really like, with the PlayStation 3, the Wii, the Nintendo DS, and a lot of retro consoles I got into as well. And so that is definitely what I would consider my primary hobby. So for secondary hobbies, there's music, which I like listening to music a lot of the time. So I basically got in first with hard rock and alternative rock, so like bands like Linkin Park with Hybrid Theory, which I would still consider to be my favorite album. Linkin Park would be my favorite band, especially with their early output. I also like POD and Satellite. I remember 3 Days Grace was the first concert I can remember going to, and Our Lady Peace, listened a lot. So I went from that, and also like to metal, especially with I remember Guitar Hero 3 coming out, like getting into that. The games, bands like obviously Metallica, and there's also, I remember Corrosion of Conformity, 2008. I actually got a jump set, and it was through instructions. Actually, my brother got a bass at the same time, and through that I kind of got into extreme metal, because my brother's bass teacher was in a death metal band. I didn't really listen to his band that much, but it got me into listening to a lot of death metal, black metal. I do tend to stick to the same stuff, but I listen to a lot of extreme metal. But it's not even just that rock. I do enjoy other genres, and particularly electronic. So I remember listening to the big beat, like the Prodigy, and also I really like drum and bass music a lot. That's probably because PlayStation nostalgia, like a lot of 90s Japanese games would have drum and bass style music. Another secondary hobby I would consider to be professional wrestling. So this is another case with video games getting me into it. So WWF Warzone for the PlayStation 1, I remember having that. That was like the very first wrestling game we had. We played that quite a bit. And also I remember our mother, she would record stuff for us, like Raws. I remember watching the very first Raw of 2003 because of the segment with Eric Bischoff booking a handicap match against the Dudley Boys. So I also like, I did keep into wrestling a lot for a few years. Like I would try to watch SmackDown every week. Right now I don't watch it as much, but I do try to keep up with AEW and Raw and SmackDown just to see like the results. And I am someone that I tend to prefer like the more sports entertainment aspect over just the pure wrestling. I do think like if it's fake, you should try to play up that it's fake and make like a lot of more entertaining aspects and exaggerations. Another one is ice hockey. So particularly the NHL, National Hockey League. I don't really follow minor leagues or international sports, but I do try to keep track of all the scores for the NHL games. And the Detroit Red Wings are my favorite team personally, but obviously they've been pretty bad the last few years. They haven't made the playoffs since 2016. But I still keep up with it. I do like watching the playoffs. The playoffs are my favorite time to watch because that's when they have overtimes and the 5-on-5 overtimes, and really like that's when the games matter the most. And then another one for secondary. This is kind of hard for me to group separately, so I just put them all together. So it'd be culture, history, war, politics, languages, and geography. So I really like obviously consuming a lot of media. Also, my parents, they would have like international students that would live with us. Like I guess they'd pay room and board to live with us. So that's how I got to experience a lot of different people from various countries. I remember we had Saudi, Chinese, Spanish. But so I definitely got into that. So through that, I like got into learning languages. So like French is the one I've dabbled in the most. But I also like learning Chinese and Japanese. I really wish I kept up with those, but because they're kind of a gateway to experience those cultures. And I definitely like reading a lot about history, particularly like the post-industrial revolution, so the 19th and 20th century, and just like cultures all around the world, of course, in the history, which also includes things like war and politics and geography. So I do like reading about that stuff. Okay, so for tertiary, there's a few tertiary stuff, but the first I'll mention is comics. So comics I got into, so it's gonna sound like a broken record, but I remember on the PlayStation 1 we had the Spider-Man video game, and that was one of my favorite games on the PlayStation 1. So it got me into Marvel, because Marvel, there was a lot of other stuff too, like the movies. I also had the Spider-Man movies, and then I remember the Hulk movie and video games, and X-Men movie and video games, and stuff like that. But it wasn't until my first year of university when during my break I decided to start reading comics online. And that's when I would read like stuff like Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, and eventually I started actually buying collected editions like Omnibus. I have a few, but it's mainly sticking to Marvel. Like DC I'm not as big a fan of. I do like Batman though. I remember also having some Batman video games, but you can tell that video games are a very common subject that I constantly bring up. But I have some Image comics as well, and I guess I mainly read superhero stuff. Why, I don't know, but I also like reading some other genres. Like I was reading Monsters, and that was pretty good. But so this is one, though. This is the picture. It just comes and goes. Another tertiary one is combat sports. So I'd say mainly mixed martial arts and kickboxing. So my grandmother, she bought me K1 Grand Prix and kickboxing on the PS1, so that's what got me into kickboxing, having obviously 2 kickboxing video games. I do try to keep up with it, but kickboxing is not really big here, so I watched other stuff. Like I had Pride DVDs that I remember my grandma bought me those as well, so I remember Pride Bushido 1, 2, and 3 in a bundle, so I'd watch those Pride events. And also I got UFC 2 on DVD for my birthday one year, so I do like watching Pride and UFC, but I don't really keep up with it too much. That's why I put it as a tertiary. But when I was younger, I also did take karate and amateur wrestling, if you count those, but that was a while. So another one would be manga and anime. That's another one that comes and goes. So the first I remember was Yu-Gi-Oh, because I had Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories, but I also collected the Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, and since I collected the cards and played the video game, I also watched the anime. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime was one of the very first animes I really watched, but I also really like Full Metal Alchemist. That was another one of the first anime I watched until I just really didn't like the plot twist near the end. But I also like Cyberpunk, so I have Ghost in the Shell and Hakuda. I have both the movies on Blu-ray. I want to get the 4K upgrade, but I also have the box sets for the manga for the Ghost in the Shell and Hakuda. And I also have Death Note was one of the first manga I read. It's complete from front to end. It was alright, but it is kind of cheesy, you know. But Dragon Ball is another one that I like. So yeah, this is one that I kind of keep up with sometimes, but I'm not a huge fan. And then another one would be movies. So movies, I'm not really a huge movie buff, but I do like action movies. So I remember like growing up, I mentioned with the comics, but I had the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. I really like those. Also, I like The Matrix, but I also really like 80s action movies. So I remember movies like RoboCop, The Terminator, Die Hard, Escape from New York. those are what I really like watching. I guess maybe because it's like the 80s, like cheesiness of the 80s, but also that's when they had a bit of edginess too, and they're definitely products of their time. But I still find them really interesting. But I also like Asian action movies too. So like The Raid Redemption is one of my favorite movies, and that's an Indonesian movie. There's also Battle Royale, which I thought was really good. And then there's also, I remember like really cheesy, violent ones like Rikio, The Legend of Ricky, or The Story of Ricky. That was hilarious, and I really like watching that. But I also watch some other genres. Like I watch some genre, like What Land, the French movie, is one of my favorite movies. But I mainly stick to action when it comes to stuff like that for film. And I also like horror movies too, actually, I should say. Like I remember watching a lot of horror movies with my uncle. I remember watching the Evil Dead is probably my favorite horror series, but also we were watching other stuff, really cheesy stuff too. Like I remember Driller, like stuff like that was really cheesy. And so the last one I'll put up that I kind of keep track of tennis, baseball, as I mentioned before, particularly MLB. I guess it would be interesting to watch the Nippon Professional Baseball, but I don't even know how I would watch it here. There's not really a simple way of doing that. But I've actually been to about 5 Detroit Tigers games. Pretty much all of my major league games, except for one Red Wings game, have been for the Tigers. So I do like watching that, and the playoffs are pretty cool. The problem for me keeping with this, there's just so many games, 162. But I do like the actual sport of watching baseball and MLB in particular. I think it would be my second favorite team sport to watch after ice hockey. You can tell me some of yours if anyone's watching this. But until next time, take care.